So as I said, when I saw this morning in the Gazette, I thought to myself, wow, what brought this on? What's this all about? So I thought we'd try to find out. It's an open letter in the Gazette in the op-ed section, and it says, with a federal election on the horizon, a plea to Mount Royal voters. And that plea is to remember that Anthony Housefather needs to be reelected for all the good things that he's done. As I said, one might expect this in the midst of an election campaign, but to find it there this morning, kind of orphaned on the op-ed page, struck me as unusual. And beyond that, it lists 69 different people who have signed on to this, including a variety of Montreal municipal mayors and other people involved in politics, and some not. So I thought we'd try to find out more. The Honourable Joan Fraser, former Canadian senator, is on the line. I've been told you're the spokesperson for the letter, so let's begin with that. How did this come together?
I don't really know. Spokesperson is kind of a grand word to use. They asked me if I'd be willing to talk to people, and here we are, talking. I came in quite late. I was asked to do a little bit of very light editing on the letter. It didn't need much, but by that time there were already, I figure at least 50 people who had signed, and I took a look at the names, and I thought, this is a group I'm proud to be associated with. These are some really fantastic people. So I didn't go beyond that. I didn't say, my gosh golly, who first raised this possibility? I just thought it's a good initiative, and it's well-deserved for Anthony Housefather, in my view. He has shown more political courage in defense of our community than anyone in years, maybe since Clifford Lincoln.
So I want to read the first sentence in this letter, which says as follows: Anthony Housefather is not just your MP. He represents the English-speaking Quebecers. No one else knows our issues as well or fights for them as hard. And the rest of it goes on to laud him, as you just sort of alluded to now, for all the things he has done. He is, of course, I think we all know this by now, he's walked away from his government when it was necessary for him to. He stood up for rights that perhaps the government failed to. But my question, I guess, is the timing. Why now? And what was the point of doing this now?
Well, as I say, I'm not sure who initially thought now would be a good time. I think it's never the wrong time to speak up in support of somebody who has shown really brave leadership. But also, there seems to be a sort of a view out here that there isn't going to be an election until next fall. We have a very unstable situation in Parliament. We could have an election any time.
Okay, well, that's fair. Let me read something else which says, with respect to Anthony Housefather, who, by the way, is on the line. He's going to join us in a minute. It says, here's one politician who more than any other today has steadfastly defended our community and protected our rights. He has contributed mightily to ensure that despite all the challenges, our community has remained strong and vibrant, an integral part of Quebec society. Now, I will point out, and I think it needs to be pointed out, that suddenly a riding that I think could have been considered safe for Anthony Housefather for a long time is perhaps now a little bit more in play. Pierre Poilievre, no surprise here, we've known this, has decided this is a riding that he thinks he could win. He's been to that riding on multiple occasions. I know he's shown up at synagogues there as well, and it is primarily, at least in the Côte St. Luc part of the riding, a very much Jewish riding, if I can say that. So suddenly there's a challenge, and I wonder if this is based on that. I can't ask you to answer that question, Joan, but does that seem reasonable to ask?
And there is no such thing as a bad question. All questions are reasonable to ask. I'm not a member of the Jewish community, so I can't speak for what's going on inside that community, but I draw to your attention that this letter is about the English-speaking community of Quebec, which includes a great many Jews, but also many thousands of people of all kinds of origins, and faith, and political allegiance. This is not a partisan letter, you know. It doesn't mention any political party. It goes back to the roots of the parliamentary system, which is you elect an MP, and the MPs who find themselves having been elected are then the ones who support or don't support a government. We believe, the people who signed that letter believe, that for our riding, Anthony Housefather has been, is, and should continue to be an excellent representative.
By the way, thank you for bringing it up. With respect, I brought up the Jewish factor, but yes, you're right. There are things in here that don't concern themselves necessarily with a community. One of the lines says he's been a leading voice against the use of the notwithstanding clause, for example, and was a strong voice leading the federal Liberal government to announce that it will challenge the preemptive use of that clause at the Supreme Court. So yes, it does take that into account. Anthony Housefather is on the line. Anthony, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Let me ask the question then, because I think it needs to be asked. Did you know this was happening? How did this come to you?
Yes. I mean, so what happened, I think, was a number of people from the English-speaking community stepped forward and said, how can we help? And so the idea of a letter was created where people would set out what a lot of people don't know, which is that you need to have MPs that understand when legislation is about to affect a community and then really, really care about it. And so a lot of the stuff that I do in Parliament, people have no idea. They may know that at committees, I got the Divorce Act amended, or I got the Act on Broadcasting amended to take into account a lot of the issues that the English-speaking community was concerned about. But literally every day, there's new things that show up, regulations, legislation, and you need to know, one, does it affect the community, and number two, who you need to reach out to ask the question as to whether it affects them, and number three, how do you handle it? And I sort of do that on a daily basis because I have 30 years of knowledge of these issues.
It would seem to me, though, I mean, and it's a wonderful letter because it has a lot of wonderful things to say about you and why people, of course, should be convinced to vote for you in an election. It struck me, though, this would be the kind of thing that if we were in an election campaign, you could go out, talk about, and say, here's what I've done, here's what I do, and this is why you should vote for me. For this to appear in the paper today just kind of seemed a bit odd.
I mean, again, as Joan mentioned, I think the feeling was, well, we don't know. I mean, hopefully the election's next October as scheduled, but it could be earlier. And the letter was there, and so why not print it? So that was just the simple rationale. And again, I was hoping that it would cause people to think, because right now I keep hearing people talking about, well, I vote for this party, I vote for that party, and I want people to vote for me whatever party they would support, whether they're Liberals, Conservatives, New Democrats, Greens, because they think I'm the best representative. And I think people sort of fail to understand that if you say I vote for a party, it means no matter how good your MP is or how bad they are, you would still vote for them irrespective or not vote for them. And that doesn't make sense because it means an MP doesn't have to do a good job. So this sort of letter was to remind people that in our system, as Joan said, you vote for a person, and remind voters in Mount Royal that I'm there not only to look after their interests, but to look after the larger interests of English-speaking Quebec, because I have the knowledge and I have the passion for it.
So to that point, you talk about voting for a person as opposed to voting for a party. Obviously, we have seen how Liberal, call it support, if you will, has sort of dropped, and it remains that way now. The Conservatives continue to be well ahead. How much of this, Anthony, because as I said to Joan just a moment ago, this would have been probably one of the safest ridings, I would think, for the Liberals, at least maybe up to a year or two ago, and now that's no longer the case. I mentioned the Conservatives have gone out of their way to go to this riding to try to convince voters there to vote Conservative and not Liberal. How much of this was brought on by that?
I mean, I think it would have probably been done regardless, but certainly it makes it all the more important. I would note in the 2011 election, Erwin Kotler won by 5 points in Mount Royal. I've extended that each election to winning by 34 points the last time. I'm confident in my place in the community and that people will support me, but I also am recognizing, of course, the Conservatives are making an effort, and I have to make a greater effort. And so this is part of reminding the community that, when you talk about issues that affect us, healthcare in English in Quebec affects us. There are a lot of issues that affect us that the Conservatives don't talk about, that the Conservatives never talk about. In fact, if they do talk about, they vote with the Bloc Québécois in favor of the notwithstanding clause being used preemptively and other things. And so I just wanted to remind people that this is an important issue for many of them, whatever their community, whether, as Joan said, there are many different communities that make up the English-speaking community, and that I think these letter writers, who are a superb group of people, who I'm honored to have on that letter, say that I'm a good person to represent them.
You know, with respect to Anglophone rights, you know, the knock against the government, right, against the Liberal government is they have talked about it, talked around it, yet done nothing to make Anglos feel better. I asked the Prime Minister that question when he was here a couple of weeks ago, and there are still people who will call, and I hear this all the time, saying, you know what, yeah, they talk about it, but at the end, nothing gets done. They don't push back. They don't defend our rights. So how do you answer that?
Well, what I say is I do, right? I mean, I think this government, the Liberal Party, is 100 times better than the other parties on these issues, even though I don't think they've done enough either, right? I'm glad we're intervening in the Supreme Court on Bill 21 and the preemptive use and notwithstanding clause. I'm glad we gave a lot of money to the official language support program. And there are good things that we have done, but not enough and not loudly enough. The recent healthcare thing was a real change, right? We're in the healthcare directive where Anna Gainey and myself and others came out. We got the Minister of Official Languages, the Minister of Health, and the Prime Minister to speak out against Quebec's healthcare directive. I mean, that was individual initiative by a few of us. And it just reminds people, again, that judge the MP for what the MP did. Me speaking out against the official languages bill from my own party is something that's very rare for an MP to do. And I should be judged based on that. That's what I did. And you can't expect another MP to come in and do the same type of thing when their party tries to pass something that hurts the rights of our community.
Okay, I am out of time. I thank you both. Joan, thank you very much. Anthony, thank you. I know we'll be speaking again, of course, for sure. And I just want you to know, Anthony, I asked you nothing about what's happening with far as the mutiny goes in Ottawa against the Prime Minister. Take note of that.
Taking note.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Aaron.